The last time this man was on this On the Mark podcast was in 2017, and we did a show, Jeff, called Swing Your Swing.
Yes. Well, we were just reminiscing a little bit about that before we started recording, and it doesn't, in some ways, it doesn't seem that long ago.
It doesn't. It doesn't. But you know what? Father Time marches on, and here of late, the PGA Tour there's a bunch of barnstormers showing up, and they're all young and fresh faced, and you're kind of in the saddle with one in Luke Clanton. So I want you to tee us off, and because when I watched him play front and center, final round, I think it was second to last group, maybe at the John Deere in 2024. I was like, I'd heard a lot about this kid, but man, he can go. And the thing that I loved was he just did himself, and I could see the Leishman fingerprints all over there. So tell us briefly about it.
Well, I'm coming up on 4 years of time with Luke Clanton, and he is South Florida kid who's grown up in Hialeah, Florida, and then ended up going to Florida State, and athletic and energetic and very grounded with family and religion, and had a fairly traumatic front and center experience in competitive golf, where he was in the match to win the national championship against Auburn, and it did not go his way. And that was earlier in the summer, and we all know that there can be certain scars or things that are left over from that, and that appears to have propelled him with other things to do some stuff this summer, which were very fun to be part of.
I will say so, and I want to mind that some, because golf is one of those games, and everyone watching this and listening to this, they're like, man, yeah, you live more panic than you live pleasure in our game by a long way. And he's a young man, oodles of talent, is in that championship match, can pull it off, doesn't, but you never know what the future holds. And all of a sudden, a few short months after that, he is like the star on the PGA Tour. And I'm on a show that's a pre-gamer, and we do gambling and best bets and stuff like that. And more often than not, these gambling gurus that I'm on there with, they are tabbing him to win a PGA Tour event. So there's a lesson in this, and I want you to share for the folks, what is it that separates him? How do you go from that huge letdown, letting yourself, your team, the whole thing down, to all of a sudden being in the mind space to do what he did just a few short months later on the tour?
Well, embracing the fact that there is going to be these ebb and flow, and that what certainly makes the good better is the fact that you've gone through the not so good. I do believe in that, and I've been around long enough to see that. I think that there's one thing to say that and another thing to truly embrace it and live it. And that match, but just the way it worked out from a television standpoint, all the other matches had ended at some point, so it was just that match on. Oftentimes there's a toggling back and forth, so it was a situation that, well, just doesn't seem to happen that often, especially in that event. And he was very emotional afterwards on national television. And so the idea that he embraced being on stage again, I think so much of it is about figuring out whether you want to be in that environment and whether you will pick yourself back up again and go back up on stage. And I think that there are a lot of parallels to acting or in performing, in the sense that it's not so much about messing up. It's the idea that you recognize that making mistakes and messing up is just part of it. And I don't think, he hasn't forgotten that. I don't think that that's been, if he was on this with us, it would still be a sore subject. He would prefer it to have gone a different way. But I think we're all faced with situations where we get knocked down. It's about getting back up again.
Amen. Quickly, before we reintroduce you to the new audience to the show, I have a dear friend, Bill Cratchit. He's a poet of sorts, and he's been in golf since Moby Dick was a minnow. And he's got Bill-isms. And one of them, he looked at me one day and he drops the glasses to the end of his nose like this, and he sort of gives me the grandfatherly eyebrows. And he goes, a lot of people want the spotlight. There are very few people that can deal with the spotlight, because everyone wants to be the YouTuber, the sensation, the star, until that light turns on, man, and it is bright, huh?
Yeah. And I don't really know whether there's something that you can train someone for that. I think an awful lot about this in my role. Like, okay, like would it even been beneficial to be able to go forward and explain to Luke, in this case, like this is what's going to happen, and you're going to come out the other side. I think then you devalue the experience by saying that. Like you're gonna okay, it's just what's going to come with this is going to be some emotional ups and downs, and you're an emotional guy, and you're going to figure out whether this is what you want to do or not.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about that some more, but first, let's reintroduce you, Jeff Leishman. Folks, he basically teaches all and sundry down in South Florida and a lot of folks in the tour. Tell our global audience briefly about you, and then we'll go on, please.
So I had a somewhat of a playing career when I was younger, and then I started looking at this as a what I wish I had when I played, but I think it's evolved from that. I'm now a little bit more advanced in years and had some more experience under my belt. I think that I am looking at hopefully a modern approach to what a relationship with a player is about. And it's there's certainly an element of technique and swing, but it's more performance. And the bottom line of this is someone performing well in tournaments, and does that equal scores that help them to ultimately, if they choose to, earning a living at it. And so I've done the job now at the PGA Tour level since 2004, so I'm coming up on 20 years of doing it on the PGA Tour. And
you're a saint.
Yeah, well, it's been great experiences. There's been great stories too. Yeah.
I want to let's stay there for a minute, because when I work for CBS certainly, but when I work for PGA Tour Live, there's a lot of players that are in the twilight of their playing career that are now turning to announcing. They're on ESPN Plus. And the first question, if I get to host and I'm not the analyst, I'll look at them if there's like a slow period in the golf and we're not just cutting between shots. And I'm like, tell me, what's it like viewing the game from outside the ropes now? How much has it changed? And to a man, each and every one of them's like, did I make these mistakes I'm watching these guys make? And I love the fact that you would talk about performance, because the Jeff Leishman I know, that's where you come from. Yes, you got to be good with technique, but there's that playing element to it. There's that self-control, all those sorts of things that are immeasurable in a sense. That's kind of where you make your hay, huh?
Yeah, I would like to try to look at it from the perspective of what are the controllables or trainables in a game which at times seems so uncontrollable and or so varied, and what are the things that someone in that environment, what is it that they can grab a hold of, and what are these trainable things that are going to be the foundation of how they go about doing the job, or in the case of a college player, where there's going to be similar experiences that happen to them on the golf course. And this is where it starts to sound like that I spend more time in the mental field. I'm not a sports psychologist. I've been around a lot of very good ones, but I think that the idea that doing this, especially competitively, is a combination of mental and physical. Like the lines get blurred there all the time. Like it is very difficult to say, oh, I messed up on this hole because I had a bad swing. Well, I think it's just more complicated than that. And also that is this situational? Is this occurred before? Is this the origin of this, that you were, incredibly nervous in that situation, you didn't know how to deal with it? There's just so many levels, and that's what fascinates me. It's what continues me doing this.
And that's why you're so great at what you do, because you're right. I've taught golf since 1996. We're both dating ourselves over here.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, I've been in this show for 9 years now. And I think like 4 or 5 years into it, I realized I'm like, just fixing a golf swing is the intellectually lazy approach to the whole thing. But anyway, I want to read you a quote here from your boy, who wasn't on the cover of the recent Golf Digest, but there he is.
There's his face, larger than life, right there in Golf Digest. Yes.
Baby-faced assassin. And like I say, I got to watch him play under pressure, and he was fiery, yet he had the ability to be like completely on when he was over the shot and then sort of out of it for a while, and he could switch on and off and go between it. I'd say his sister, if that's who it is outside the ropes, was more fiery than him.
Yes, that was his sister. Yeah, she's definitely the loudest cheerleader in the crowd, even as the crowds get bigger. She's
I actually got, I
got
actually got on,
volume.
I got on my talk back and I spoke to our director. I'm like, listen, there's someone out here wearing a Luke Clanton, I love Luke Clanton t-shirt. She's rowdy. Get a picture on her, and they did.
Yes.
But anyway,
Yeah.
so here's a quote by Luke. And it goes, during those first 2 years of college, Leishman, that's you, completely changed my mentality. And then he goes further. He helped me see that my focus on winning created a lot of anger on the golf course. The self-imposed pressure to win made every bad shot feel like the end of the world. And there was more, but that's the kind of thing that I will really want you to elaborate on, because I feel like so many aspirant golfers feel that way. Because if you're a junior trying to get into college, or if you're collegian trying to become the All-American, and if you're the All-American trying to get into the pros, you know, it feels so, there's a sense of urgency, the tyranny of the urgent. But yeah, you help Luke kind of put things into perspective some and control his emotions, which I feel like has probably been a large part of all the success of late.
Yeah, he's still an emotional guy, and it's still very important to him. I would say he was not in the best state of mind after the RSM recently. So
he finished runner-up, incidentally, folks. And did he bogey? He bogeyed the last hole, right?
He bogeyed the last hole. Yes, he didn't hit a necessarily good executed second shot in the left bunker, and hit a good bunker shot and missed about a 7-footer to what eventually would have been a playoff with Maverick McNeely. And so, I mean, there's still the evolution of this with I believe everybody. I mean, it's nobody's exempt from this. And so the changing to what I just alluded to earlier, like, okay, what is it that you can control? There is going to be some kind of outcome here. We would prefer this outcome to be X, whatever that is. But the reality of it is, which would be sort of I guess, a more modern version of saying one shot at a time. Like,
yeah,
okay, what are you going to do on this, execute on this tee shot? And what are you going to execute here on this approach? And the more the 1 foot, 1 step at a time thing that we not only do in preparation for tournaments, but we do it in practice too. So they're instilling that in practice, and always leading on good, and never practicing past the point of productivity, or setting sort of reasonable goals in practice so that he is pushed or motivated to do these more difficult things, but then there's an end to it. It's just not like practice until the day is over and wake up the next day and go all day every day. He was a kid. He is a kid, like a lot of young men that are, or young men and women that are highly motivated, wanted to really do this very well, and it's pretty common in sport these days. So they've heard the Malcolm Gladwell, or their parents have heard the 10,000 hours, and I'm not just going to put in 10,000. I'm going to put in 30,000, and somehow that's going to lead to, I'm never going to make a mistake, or that I'm going to win all the time. And we know that that's just not accurate. That's just flawed.
Mm-hmm. I hope a lot of parents, and including myself, because I have my oldest daughters are a pretty talented young golfer. And it's the same sort of thing, because as soon as it doesn't go bad, look, I've seen what she's been doing behind the scenes, and I'm like, you need to kind of work harder. But again, there's more to it. I want to visit something you said there again. And my question that I wanted to ask was, you know, the ratio between practice versus playing. I've worked with golfers who were range rats, who figured that if you just perfect technique, you're going to make lower scores. Then I've worked with golfers who will hit 5 or 6 balls, go on the golf course and spend the time there. It appears to me that Luke Clanton is the latter. And you talked about practicing past productivity. I've seen that on the range. I've never seen that on the course. What is your take on that ratio there?
Well, I would say that where that appears on the golf course is that if you just hit, like, what we're not talking about playing for a score, we're just talking about hitting shots and executing. Yeah. And I would prefer that to transfer. So you got something that you're doing in a practice environment, and then you're looking for that to transfer into the golf course. So that transfer happens different ways or some ways differently for some people compared to others. And it's not, it could be a field goal kicker or a baseball pitcher. Okay, we're also looking at, we got these skills, and do those skills, are they good enough for whatever level we want to get to? And then are they, again, coming with us into a situation that we want them? So that maybe is a fairly low value situation, like you're just going and playing a few holes with some friends, or it's a higher value situation, like you want it to come out in a tournament. Mm-hmm. So you have a realistic evaluation of those skills, and then they maybe sometimes come with like a relationship with a coach or a parent or whatever, like some essentially an objective opinion that, yeah, these skills are good enough in this environment. Are they transferring to where I would want them to occur on the golf course? And the part that I would say, it's not that I disagree with you, is that where I think that it's not productive is that if you hit a 7-iron to 4 feet, there's no point in hitting another one on the golf course, because the probability of that one going better is just not likely. So I'm a big believer in that if you hit one on the golf course that you don't like let's say it's missed the green badly, then you play another one, because then now you've got, as long as you have got that skill set, you're more likely now to see a good one, so that over time you are more likely to always be ending, whether it's a shot or some kind of practice session, always with an image and a feeling of good and not the bad.
Yeah, I really like that, and building on that too. It's like if you go out just and play a few holes, some variation. Like I've seen time and time again with a lot of elite golfers I've been around, where you're out there by yourself and you hit one shot, and you get there and you just throw a handful of balls, and then you go from there, and then you hit those, and then you play the ball you're playing, but then you're just sort of playing variables around there too. Part of that skills you recommend, because it's almost to a place where, when I watch these elites out there and when you work with them, they have a separator to them. And the thing that Luke has to me, and I want you to correct me because I've only watched him play for like 10 holes. He's got serious power for a slightly built man.
Yeah.
He's got that sense for the moment where if there's a shot that has to be hit, he has the ability to pull it off. A lot of folks kind of wilt in that place. And then he created a lot when I was watching him play. Like I was saying, there was shot shaping going on all the time. It wasn't robotic in what he was doing. And to me, that was the separator. Are you sort of on board with that observation?
Yeah, all three of those observations, I agree. And he is better when there is creativity, there is boundaries of less of ball from point A to point B, but more that it's going to be traveling somewhere in space. And so whether that is in clouds or in the trees or within these areas, and that's part of what I think has evolved from what's good enough. Like if it is ball from point A to point B, the only thing that's good enough can be that it goes in the hole, or that it's so close that somehow that it garners, that's good enough. But if it's within these acceptable boundaries, then the person, I mean, I don't think it lowers expectation in any way. It certainly doesn't lower expectation in him, but then he's not as hard on himself that he hasn't hit it close. Like the close is good enough within it. And it would just be an application of what in modern terms is the dispersion pattern. Like, is it within your dispersion? Like, this is good enough. It's fine.
Yeah. That, I love the dispersion pattern thing. It was on the show that Scott Fawcett talked about shooting a shotgun pattern versus a rough. And that is, very, very true. Because it is amazing to me, and I've referenced this earlier, where so many golfers, it's like it's got to be like pinpoint or not. Where at the highest level, the pressure's so high that oftentimes I've been there standing on the 18th tee calling some guy's shot. He has to make 4 to win. And the closing announcement from me or Nance, whoever it is like, get this thing in the fairway and you're golden. I want you smiling for the folks who are listening on audio. If you look at Jeff, he's got a big grin on his face, because this is the truth, right? It doesn't have to be perfect all the time.
No, like sometimes a nice heel cut is a really valuable thing, or a lot of shape. So there's some demanding tee shots. I'll use the RSM as an example. So that's the last tournament that he played in where he had a chance to win. And there's a few holes out there where there's marsh, and you've got to step up into a good one, and there's crosswinds, and so he's playing that with the understanding that his shape. He plays predominantly left to right. The ball's going to start on the marsh, and it's going left to right. There's a lot of shape to it, and so he's using all that space to not have it defined. Now, there's still an element somewhat of, okay, it's going to start out over here and work its way across to this spot. It's not nondescript, but it's not like, it's not a rifle. And I have tried very hard to train him in that sense of, if that thing does do that and you whacked it out of the heel, and maybe it's not going to go as far, that's still fine too, as long as it's not happening on a hole where
forced carry.
Forced carry, exactly. But I believe that what makes us more accurate as humans than robots is the fact that we can use shape, that we can use mishits to our advantage, which ultimately I believe can make us more accurate because of that. I don't see that as a flaw.
No, heck no. And you're playing, and a golfer is playing in such variable mediums, like the air is never standing still.
Yes.
Think about how many times you get a level/good lie, even in the fairway.
Well, I'm talking about these difficult tee shots, like the second or third, fourth tee shot at RSM, the Seaside Golf Course. Yeah, I mean it's tricky. Again, there's usually a left to right wind, and so the idea that wind is not constant. It's variable. There's gusting winds, and you're moving, and so the idea that that's going to equal some level of exactness, I think that it's going to be within a certain range, and he has accepted that.
Yeah, for the folks who don't know Seaside Golf Course down in the Golden Isles of Georgia, you should check it at Sea Island. It's great. And 4 is this boomerang-shaped par 4 that turns left around the marsh. Bulkheads all the way down the left. On the right, there's a fairway bunker, kind of an aiming point, and a cart path just to the right.
And another pond over there, too.
Yeah, exactly. And the wind is ordinarily this time of the year coming into you from about 10 o'clock on your dial. And if you spin one, that path is in play. And you're right, 4 is a really good score on that all. I want to go along these lines a bit more because I'd scribbled down some notes here. And we've talked about practice versus play. And now there's technique versus shot making. And I've never seen Luke swing slow-mo. I'd love to see it. It's, there's so many elements to it that are endearing it to the eye when he's at speed. But clearly he's worked on refining some things there in order to hit that predictable fade. Talk to the viewer and the listener about that, because it's one thing just to go and stand there and practice fades or draws or whatever, but it's another to know that, look, my fade is never going to overcut, or I'm going to try and eliminate that big pull when I try and hit a fade. So talk to us.
Well, there was and is a certain amount of practice that in the modern world where you're dealing with a radar, that is the face to path relationship consistent enough that that curve is within this range. So that's the first step. Like, is it? And then doing that at speed. One of the things I would say was a fairly significant milestone for Luke this summer was that he became aware that if he just centered the strike on his driver, that in those pressure situations he could go faster and faster. And that was and you'll see that actually, like I can see it even if I'm not there. You can look at the ShotLink data and see that his ball speeds are going up and up and up, and that gives him an outlet for his own excitement, nervousness. Like, he smashed one off of 18 at a number of places. In Detroit, where he had a top 10, and then even John Deere, like, it's how he plays 17. Like, 17 was a tricky tee shot at John Deere.
He took it right down the triple line of those trees down the left hand side.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a lot of talk about that tee shot, and he can draw his mini driver, but didn't really want to do that. And earlier in the week, he actually had rattled it around in the trees right there and had 200 yards in for his third. But that did not deter him in playing it that way, because he wanted, in a nervous situation, to be able to let it out. Like, he was going to hit it hard. And it really wasn't even about like getting to the green in 2. It was just more in those nervous situations to be able to trust that he could go faster and still center the strike, and that the face-to-path relationship was not going to produce anything wild.
Yeah.
And there was a numerical reference to that. Not, I don't mean that on the golf course, but like actually in training, and then a reliance and a trust on that. And the fact that it
So share those numbers with us. What was the path and face with the driver?
So his path varies anywhere between 2 and 4 left. And sometimes that'll be a little bit more aim. Sometimes that might be a ball up. But those things will match. And that most of it is just him feeling like the club face is closed enough that it starts left and cuts. It's not an open-faced deal. It's essentially what, and there will be a pull, as you're pointing out, like, you know, in that pattern, I believe that the miss is a pull. Scott Fawcett calls it a hot pull, you know, and Luke would prefer not to have a pull on the 17th hole at John Deere, and, you know, or in any situations where he's cutting it off the trouble. Like eventually he's going to be hopefully playing at Sawgrass one year, and he's going to cut it off of the water on 18 there. And okay, he's going to want it to not stay left, but like building the trust in that. And then there's certainly a fitting that goes into that to make sure that he one of the benefits of having the speed that he has, like he's able to get in pressure or on tournament situations, low 180 ball speed, even from his smaller size, you say, like he weighs 155 pounds, is that he's higher spin. So I would say that we've chosen fitting a driver that by modern standards is higher spin, which I want because I want it to be able to curve. Want to use spin for accuracy. Don't want to have a knuckleball coming out at any point. We want it to be shaping.
This is why I love you, you know, because you've said a few things there that, you know, folks who know just enough to be dangerous and are dangerous to a lot of people have a big voice on social media. And, you know, next thing you see golfers get fit and they got a low spinning driver. They got with a low lofted driver. They got a low spinning ball. They're now using ground reaction forces. And these folks are bouncing all over the place while they're swinging. And they're littering golf courses with shots in the interests of meeting this myth in terms of what you're supposed to do.
The one, maybe, the one that happened in the fitting, or the one a day where it's optimized and they do actually hit up on it and it has 2100 spin and it is optimized. There isn't any argument about that. But we know we got to hit like 10 of them or 12 of them in a day, and you want to be able to find them all. So that's really where I see the benefit of being average, or excuse me, better than average speed or longer than average speed, is that you then can be at times inefficient with the spin rates to be more accurate.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, okay, that's Luke. Because a lot of folks are listening to this, the fans are like, wow, this is cool, digging these numbers and stuff right up my alley. But how do I apply this to me? Now, if Joe guy comes to you, and I know this is generic, so forgive me, humor me. Joe golfer comes over there and he's like, Jeff, I need a bit more speed. And you kind of let the cat out of the bag earlier where you were talking about just hit it in the middle of the face, you know, and that starts to happen consistently. Then think of speed more. But when it comes to this whole speed thing, because it feels like golf is awash with speed numbers right now. When you're working with some club golfer, just to pick up a few miles an hour, share one or two little nuggets, insights, please.
Well, the first thing would be, can they center the strike? And in doing so, do they slow down? Because there is that relationship for everybody. When someone is, like even a high-level golfer, is working on gaining speed, they should have a designated time when they're doing that. The strike quality is going to go down. There is going to be, it's a consequence of that. So for a club golfer, if centering the strike means that their swing speeds go down significantly to make that happen, well, then now there's going to need to be a trade-off, like a happy medium of, okay, we can go faster. And I think that's, I mean, I hear that on a regular basis on a driving range here at the Dye Preserve. Like someone hits it and they say, oh, I swung too fast. Well, I mean, I can tell you that, I mean, Luke Clanton, for example, he's giving it a rip, or Johnny or Scotty Scheffler. I mean, they're giving it a rip. The thing is that they still know factually that it's not going to compromise the strike. And so to a club golfer, there's this blend of swinging fast enough and efficiently enough that they can still center it somewhat, and this is again where fitting comes in, where probably higher lofted driver, where there's going to be more spin on it, that then allows for a little bit more variation on miss hits. Because the other thing that will happen is when you are in this optimal fitting, if you bang one out of the toe and the spin rates drop to 1,500 RPMs, the ball could do all kinds of different things. I mean, it could be a blowout to the right, it could be a nosedive left, fall out of the air. So that balance, and it's pretty easy. All you have to do is get into with some foot spray and start spraying your driver a little bit and know, okay, where am I actually hitting this thing? And then you add the speed and I also am a big believer at a club level, like you should have a shot shape, like even if it means left to right, and as much as you hate saying, I don't like cutting the ball or I don't like slicing it. Well, I mean, the main factor is that you have this predictable pattern. You need, because you got to aim it somewhere. And there also is a threshold in club golf, which TrackMan's done a bunch of data, which is 140. Like you just got to really hit something that gets you inside 140. And some of that is also playing the appropriate tees. You play the appropriate tees, get inside 140, and then you go to work from there. And if you aren't getting inside 140, well, then yeah, distance is a priority, or you are playing the wrong tees.
Yeah, amen. The Reverend Jeff Leishman at the pulpits. I want to ask you about this too, because again, like I had the luxury of watching Luke play, and I get to watch the best of the best at their best. And you talk about centeredness of strike.
Yeah.
But despite all the movement, and I'm not a big believer in subtracting movement from a golf swing to hit the ball better. I just like the boundaries of the swing to be somewhat defined, because the really good ones who hit it hard consistently, where they're moving is pretty centered within their space.
Yeah, I agree.
Luke does that too when I watch him swing it.
Yeah, without taking a too deep dive into science, I mean, I have measured him in 3D a couple of times, and biomechanically, he's very efficient. So that's not a magical thing that he's producing at 155 pounds that he can almost get 190 ball speed in training. So he is very efficient in that movement. The issue would be, is that a functional playing speed? Does it have a predictable shape somewhat? And then also, can he center it? Is there a compromise there? Or a balancing of those pieces. And centering the strike, as you can probably tell, is such a big component to me, because how many times, especially recently, I've seen that misdiagnosed. Like someone just today was talking to me about how they were coming over the top of it. And I'm thinking, well, that doesn't really look like that's happening. And they've been convinced that the reason why their ball is going left is because someone has said in their group that they're coming over the top of it. And I'm showing them that they're whacking it way out of the toe. And it's causing this toe strike, but they're doing all these things to fix something and essentially undermining their confidence and wasting time, misdiagnosing why the whole thing is happening in the first place.
This sounds like we're going back to swinging your swing with Jeff Leishman.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, I would like to think that I'm a version of the same person that you interviewed in 2017.
It's because here's the thing. This interaction between club face and ball hasn't changed from when Tom Morris was hitting featheries around Scotland somewhere. The way the club and ball interacts the same. I want to ask this some too, because to that point, you think of swing your swing, Arnold Palmer, and then you think of Jack Nicklaus, and everyone does their own thing. But if I think of Arnie and Jack, Arnold plays shut club face, flex wrist at the top. Jack was more sort of cupped and neutral up there. Different club face positions, but both of them, it almost looked like they rotated around their head, and there wasn't a lot of side to side going on with their golf swing, especially with a driver. I'm sort of feeling like you might tend to want to go there when it comes to the centering of the strike. Am I right?
Yeah. A centered pivot historically, if we're just looking at, it is an easier thing to deal with in this game, centering your pivot. Okay. And then how do we work within that to still make sure that we're creating, you alluded to it before, enough ground action forces or enough movement to be able to generate speed.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, I think it's a trained skill to center the strike. Like, I do believe that you need to be able to be training that, and it's something that is it's challenging. It's probably, you know, the fundamental thing that works against a beginner. Okay, so a beginner embarks on wanting to play golf, they see movement or they get some advice on that movement, and that movement might improve, but in the meantime, it actually moves them further away from getting good ball to club contact. Their motion looks better. They've increased the possibility of maneuvering their way around the golf course, but in the short term, they've decreased that connection. So then there needs to be the next step, which is, okay, I'm going to use this current motion and I need to make better contact. And I got to work on that specifically. I see those as connected, but different things.
Yeah, love it. A few things I'd love to hit here. Sort of, again, keeping Luke in mind, but helping golfers from the aspirant collegian, the junior golfer, the club golfer, whoever. I want to talk about goal setting and then the managing of expectations. You've talked about managing emotions a little bit, but to me, you know, for the golfer who's going somewhere because of a goal, forgive me, the expectation management is such a difficult thing. And I'm sure with some of the golfers you alongside, especially a young Luke Clanton right now, where it's like the world is his oyster. You got to keep the thing in front of you over here. Your take?
Yeah, I think there is a difference between an expectation and a goal. And I think that you are, this is where it gets back to a realistic evaluation, and as much as you can, an objective evaluation of your skills. Mm-hmm. And then do they align with where you want to go? Like, or what's the next step in this journey? So Luke would certainly like to win major championships, or, you know, be in contention to do that. My job, and also his job, is, okay, are those skills there, both mental and physical, to be able to increase the likelihood of that occurring? And then that also comes with a score, because currently the guy who is the top of the world, it's not so much that you need to beat him, but you need to produce scores that are lower than him. He's phenomenal at producing these low scores. He's phenomenal at producing 20 under. So it's logical to me, from my business background, that first of all, we've got to train in a way that makes it possible that that can be us, or that can be a player that I work with. And so then that also can then go down to, it doesn't have to be a professional golfer. It's like if somebody who wants to break 80. Okay, so what's going into breaking 80? Like, I've got a junior golfer who aspires to eventually maybe play pro golf, but their first step now is to break 80. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we need this number of these tee shots. We see a certain number of these approaches that need to be in this area, and we need to have, and we're fortunate enough to live in an area, a time now where there's a lot of data on that. Like, we have like real-time data. It's not just me basing this on my experience, or I can say, like, okay, if you want to break 80, you got to have this number of shots inside 140 as a junior golfer. You got to do with them. You got to have, if you miss greens, you got to be able to hit it inside 10 feet. And then you got to be this proficiency putting. And does that mean that that's a guarantee? No, because we know there's too many variables. But there is a formula there now, because we know we have a pretty clear handle on what's good enough.
I would say, I mean, I'm listening to you. So many golfers are kind of averse to that, and I can't tell you how it used to aggravate me, being a recovering college coach, how at the end of rounds I used to have to beg and then eventually scream and lose my hair, pull my hair out to get these kids to fill out their statistical packages. But if you're disciplined about that, there is a treasure trove of information that can direct your work to achieving those goals. You agree?
Yeah, and sometimes it can also be a slap in the face. Like, I mean, it can be a shocking thing for people who would like to believe that they don't hit their 5-iron well enough, and to have someone say, statistically, as long as your 5-iron doesn't produce penalty shots, it's fine. It's not about that. It's sometimes the boring stuff that you need to be a lot better from, if you're an amateur golfer, from 100 to 140. Mm-hmm. So, and that's typically not for some people not that fun to go and work on that. Like it's not an enjoyable thing. So, you know, if you're coaching those people or teaching them, well, some of it is just getting the right level of buy-in and convincing them that, okay, like if you're serious about lowering scores, these are the area that matter. These and I it's part of my job to look at how to compare, and I have done a fair amount of research looking at Scotty's year, and Scotty has performed incredibly well statistically, but he is really good in the areas that matter. He's phenomenal in terms of those scoring specifics, and we all know that he's just become a little better than average in putting. Like everybody was talking about, what if Scotty Scheffler just becomes average putter? Well, we just saw it this past year, and that is, it works the same way for a club golfer, even if you're just trying to break 100 for the first time.
That guy's got a wonderful command, or understanding, I should say, of where the toe of the golf club is in relation to the heel throughout that golf swing of his.
Yes.
And despite all the stuff that's going on with his feet.
Yeah, of course. I love the fact that that's the, you know, that's the best golfer, because we're no longer then bound by, you know, it's got to look a certain way or be a certain way. Like he's very good at distance control, phenomenal. He's very good at centering the strike. He has a great relationship with his caddy, and they speak a very good language. And this is a formula which is producing lots of opportunities, and he capitalizes on those. So,
he is militant about checking his grip before every shot. It's amazing. I watch him. He's got this molded grip on a 5-iron. It's every single time.
It's amazing how popular that is now. That used to be a thing. Like, oh my goodness, you can't be using a grip trainer. Well, now everybody, I mean, has got a Scotty Scheffler grip trainer on, because when
he holds it, he gets his hands on there, and then you watch his eyes. His eyes train up to the toe of the club, and he holds it, and it's like he checks the whole way down, gets the feel, steps up there, another one, exactly what he was looking for. It's like Dead Scott, his caddy you reference. I was calling them at Hilton Head here in 2014, and Scotty cobbled together 64 that looked like nothing. I mean, it looked like he barely broke a sweat. And the 11th hole there, it's narrow, and it's into a quartering breeze there, and a lot of players going with less than driver just to find the fairway. Scotty just laces driver straight down the middle there. I mean, hit it, was down for the tee immediately. Wedge on there, makes birdie. So I say to Teddy afterwards, I'm like, "You serious about that stuff?" And he goes, "You know what? I could tell him, Scotty hit it in that trash can over there." He'll go, "How far is it?" And I'll go, 202. Next thing is like, it's right in there. That's just the command that he has right now. But it's from such a fundamentally simple and sound place where he approaches it.
Yeah. And I by no means was talking about it. Am I devaluing the skill of that? Like that is a trained, a repeated skill to be able to strike the ball with that level of control, to have that distance control or that level of distance control. So, but I do believe that that is something that's trainable. It is, I mean, I want to believe that, and I realize potentially that I'm biased as a result of that, because, and I love the fact that it doesn't look robotic. I remember seeing a montage on, I'm trying to think of where it was, but of all his driver swings at Eastlake, and just watch, yeah, exactly. They look like, how many driver swings would he have made? You know, probably 12 a day. So, you know, 24, 48 of them. They look like 48 different swings. Yeah. So, okay, we got 48 different swings, but we got probably 48 pretty good outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the thing too, and I was saying it too, like his follow throughs a tell of what he's trying to hit. You know, you can see how he's just creating.
But that's not that far from Arnold Palmer. I mean, you made that reference. I mean, that's a similar thing, and that sometimes when I'm talking about this, it starts to sound like I don't value technique. Like I wouldn't be trying to teach everybody that balance isn't important. It's less important to Scotty. And we also could make an argument that Scotty Scheffler may be better if his balance was better. We could make that argument, but clearly that's not necessary. And it possibly, if he focused on that, might make him worse, because it makes him very aware of that. It devalues the things that he's really good at. So it's not that I think that everybody should be, who's listening to this, oh, that balance doesn't matter. Well, for some people, balance is really important. It's the thing that you need to be better at the striking of the ball.
I would say this, and then I want to pivot to the last observation I want you to share. All that movement, he actually, in watching him when he's playing under pressure, he actually creates more space for his arms and club to perform in front of him. He never
Yeah.
jams that club whatsoever. It's getting a free pass from the top of his backswing to the top of his follow. There is no interruption by his body getting in the way at all, ever. It's incredible to watch. Help the parents here, please, Jeff, because I'm sure there were some Clanton parents that were, biggest fans in the world, and they turn to you and experts. But it's hard for us to relinquish, when it's our pride and joy, and there's this, wow, this could be something special. So give some parents who might be listening to this, who've got the talented kid or the aspirational child, whatever, help us. Give us some marching orders, please.
Well, what you're looking for in a relationship from anybody who's helping your son or daughter is an objective opinion. And it's very difficult when you're the parent to be objective. You're very subjective. You care a lot. And that's not to say that I don't care about the people that I work with, but I'm not a family member, and I'm in a role to be objective. I'm looking at whether things are good enough and whether they align with what this person wants to do. And so objectivity is key. And the ability to have some perspective on what the journey looks like, I think, is helpful. Like to offer that it's okay that, Luke, I think in that article, referenced the fact that he had a chance to win the Jones Cup at Ocean Forest approximately a year ago. And it was, at the time, it was annoying. They were painful for him. I wouldn't say painful, but he was annoyed that it didn't happen. And so I think quoted in the article saying that, and I told him, and I remember saying this, this is important, I get that, but this won't matter 6 months from now. And I had no idea really that it was going to equal what had happened this summer, but that is a lesson for people that tend to, whether it's parents or golfers, really overemphasize the lack of an outcome that they want. And the other last thing that I would say I remind people of is that essentially we're all going to learn from our mistakes, or at least we should. So we don't want to rob our children from making mistakes. Like, they're going to learn. What comes with that is, emotion, and sometimes pain, and sometimes less than ideal feelings inside. But I think it's totally wrong to try to remove that from someone's development.
Brilliant. I want to say this, one more. For the kid listening who now is wanting to go to college, because I see them when I was teaching full time, they're showing up all the time. It's got this visit, that visit, play here, play there. They're running around like squalid cats. And then they get to the event, and do you think they're going to play their best? And the coach shows up for like 2 or 3 holes because the coaches have got people they got to see, and you might make a bogey or two, then the coach leaves, and the poor child's like, all right, that's me, I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that it's normal to feel uncomfortable and a certain level of stress when you're being watched, and that I can also give feedback based on my own interaction with coaches that really what they're looking at is more of how you react to stress. It's not whether you do well. If they are coming to watch you, they already know that you're a good golfer or that you're on the radar. So be very mindful of the fact that even though it's not maybe going as well as you want, their reaction, they're watching the reaction of your parents. What does this look like? What are the dynamics of this? Because that's to them just as important as whether you're flushing iron shots.
So true. Love it. I always love our conversations. I appreciate you being available for us, Jeff. If the viewers, the listeners, want to find more from you, please direct them to social media, websites, or whatever.
Sure. So Instagram, it's my name, Jeff, Jeff__ Leishman, golf, and then jeffleishmangolf.com is the website, which most people don't seem to go to websites anymore, but there's a bunch of stuff on there, including our podcast from the last time. So it's still on there. I still think it's a good representation of how I do the job. And then for X, it's at Jeff Leishman Golf.
Well, you haven't changed since 17. I've aged a bit more and I speak a little slower now that I've got.
Well, there's a little bit more silver or gray on my face here, for sure. So
those things are earned, aren't they? Hey,
yeah.
Jeff, fantastic stuff. Continued success, although I don't doubt it whatsoever, given your approach.
Well, appreciate it. Thank you.
One of the great ones. Thank you.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you on the road.